There is an old story that keeps appearing across cultures and centuries, dressed in different costumes but always telling the same thing. Person leaves. They go somewhere alone. A desert, a forest, a mountain, a cell, a room. The people who knew them mark their departure as either madness or failure. The departure does not look like a beginning. It looks like an ending. And then, at some point that the story never fixes to a specific calendar date, something happens in the solitude. Something that could not have happened in the crowd. And the person who eventually returns is not the person who left. The story is so old it predates writing. It appears in the oldest texts of every civilization that ever produced texts. And it keeps appearing generation after generation because it is not a story about exceptional people. It is a story about a process available to anyone, a process that almost no one in the current age is willing to undertake, and a process whose output, the returned, transformed person, is one of the rarest and most recognizable things in human life. This essay is about that process, about what actually happens when a person goes into genuine solitude. Not the solitude of a weekend retreat, not the solitude of a 2-week vacation, not the solitude of a quiet evening. The solitude that lasts. The solitude that goes long enough and deep enough that the self the person brought into it begins to come apart, and whatever is underneath begins to come up. About why that process is so consistently misread by the people watching from the outside. About what the psychological traditions of the last century discovered about it that the ancient mythologies had already been encoding for millennia. And about why, in this specific moment of human history, in a culture that has made the cost of solitude higher than it has ever been, and the rewards of noise louder than they have ever been, the capacity to go genuinely alone is simultaneously the most countercultural act a person can perform and the most consequential gift they can give themselves. Let's start with what solitude is not, because the confusion between solitude and its cheaper substitutes is responsible for most of the misunderstanding about what it does. Solitude is not being alone in a room with your phone. Solitude is not working from home. Solitude is not the absence of other people while still being psychologically occupied by them, by their opinions, their expectations, their projected versions of you, their imagined reactions to what you are doing and thinking. These states are privacy or quiet or reduced social stimulation. They are not solitude because solitude is not defined by the absence of other bodies. Solitude is defined by the absence of the social audience inside your own mind, the withdrawal of attention from the imagined other, the return of the full force of your attention, for the first time, to what is actually happening inside you, rather than to the continuous performance of yourself for the eyes of others. This distinction matters enormously because most people who report having tried solitude and found it empty were not actually in solitude. They were alone and they brought their audience with them. They sat in a quiet room and ran imaginary conversations. They walked in a forest and composed the social media post about walking in a forest. They removed themselves from the social environment while keeping the social environment running as the primary occupant of their inner life. This is not solitude. This is privacy with extra steps. And privacy does not produce what solitude produces, because the mechanism through which solitude does its work requires the one thing that the social audience, even in its imagined form, prevents. It requires the self to encounter itself directly, without the mirror of the other, without the frame that other people's presence, real or imagined, places around every piece of your experience. Naked, unframed, alone with whatever is actually there. What is actually there when the frame is removed is different for every person and yet also in its general shape remarkably consistent. What is there in the early stages of genuine solitude is noise. Not external noise, the internal noise that the social environment had been drowning out and that the absence of the social environment allows to surface. the unprocessed material that daily life had been preventing from being processed, the feelings that had been too complex or too threatening to feel in the flow of ordinary engagement, the thoughts that had been interrupted before they could complete themselves, the grief that had been redirected into productivity, the anger that had been converted into reasonableness, the desires that had been buried under the performance of not having them. All of this surfaces in the early stages of genuine solitude, and the experience of its surfacing is not pleasant. It is, in fact, so unpleasant that most people who encounter it conclude that solitude does not work for them, that they are the kind of person who needs people, that the quiet makes them anxious, that being alone makes them worse rather than better. And they return to the social environment, and the noise goes underground again, and the unprocessed material continues to accumulate, waiting for the next opportunity to surface. What they have encountered is not a sign that solitude does not work for them. It is a sign that solitude is working exactly as it should. The noise that surfaces in the early stages is the beginning of the process, not evidence that the process is wrong. The ancient traditions knew this. Every contemplative practice in every culture that developed one included, as an essential element, the instruction to remain in the discomfort of the early stage, to not flee it, to sit with the surfacing material rather than suppressing it again. Because the surfacing material, allowed to surface fully and to run its course without interference, does something that the contemplative traditions across the world all described in different languages but always as the same thing. It exhausts itself, processes itself, completes itself, and what remains after the early stage noise has run its course is something that has no good name in modern English, but that the traditions variously called stillness or presence or clarity or emptiness in the sense of a mind that has finally finished generating its own interference. The psychological tradition of the last century gave this same progression a different vocabulary. The noise of the early stage corresponds, roughly, to the contents of what it called the personal unconscious, the accumulated unprocessed material specific to the individual's history and circumstance. As the personal unconscious material surfaces and processes in the early stage of solitude, the deeper layer beneath it begins to become accessible. And the deeper layer, the psychological tradition called the collective unconscious, is not personal. It is not made of the specific unprocessed memories and feelings of this particular person's particular life. It is made of something older and stranger and more difficult to describe. It is made of the organizing patterns of human experience itself, the structural templates through which human beings have always processed existence, the templates that appear as gods and monsters in mythology, as angels and demons in religious imagery, as recurring characters across the literature of every culture and every era. The psychological tradition called these templates archetypes, and the discovery that they are accessible to individual human consciousness in the deep stage of genuine solitude was one of the most significant findings of the entire tradition, and one of the least discussed in the modern world, because the modern world has no framework for knowing what to do with it. What does it mean, practically, to say that the deep stage of solitude gives you access to the organizing patterns of human experience? It means this. In the ordinary social environment, you experience yourself as one person, as this specific individual with this specific history and this specific set of concerns and this specific agenda for the day. This experience is real. It is also, in a very precise way, partial, because you are also something more than this specific individual. You are also the temporary expression, in this particular body, of patterns that existed long before you were born and will continue after you are gone. The pattern of the hero, the seeker, the exile, the one who descends and returns. The pattern of the wise elder, the trickster, the wounded healer. The pattern of the figure who goes into the desert and comes back changed. These patterns run through you and always have, and the reason you recognize them so powerfully in stories, the reason a particular character or a particular narrative arc can reach something in you that feels older and deeper than your personal history, is that what is recognizing it is older and deeper than your personal history. It is the part of you that is not just you. That is all of humanity, that has been dreaming the same dreams and telling the same stories since before the oldest civilization on the planet was built. This is what genuine solitude, taken deep enough, gives you access to. Not just your own particular thoughts and feelings, but the deeper layer where you are not just yourself. The encounter with this layer is what the ancient traditions were sending people into the desert to have. It is why the transformative figures of the oldest stories always went alone. Not because community was unimportant. The transformed figure almost always returned to community. But because the specific thing that needed to happen could only happen in the absence of the social mirror. Could only happen when the self had stopped performing itself for any audience and had finally descended far enough to encounter the layer where the performance was never occurring. And every tradition that sent people into this encounter had the same report of what came back from it. A person who was, in some way that was both entirely specific and entirely difficult to articulate, more real than the person who went in. If any part of this is starting to land, take a second now and subscribe. The work we do here goes to depths that almost nowhere else is willing to go, the layer beneath the self, the layer where the oldest patterns live, the layer that solitude is the specific key to. Hit the bell while you are there. Now let's get specific about what this looks like in practice, because the philosophical frame is in place and the practical question is, what does a person actually do with this? The first thing to understand about the practical cultivation of genuine solitude is that it is not achieved by finding the right physical conditions. The right physical conditions help. Quiet, natural environments, the removal of electronic devices, the absence of structured demands on your time, these create the container. But the container is not the thing. The thing is the internal act of withdrawing the attention from the social audience inside your mind. This is an act, not a condition. It requires practice. And in the beginning, the practice fails constantly because the social audience is extraordinarily persistent. You sit down to be alone with yourself, and within 3 minutes you are rehearsing a conversation, composing a text, imagining someone's reaction to something you said, planning how you will describe this experience of solitude to someone else. The audience has reassembled inside your skull almost before you noticed it was gone. The practice is not to prevent this from happening. The practice is to notice when it has happened and to return. To notice, without judgment, that the audience is running again, and to gently, specifically withdraw from the imagined conversation, the rehearsed reply, the composed post, and to return your attention to what is actually present. What is in your body right now? What is in the room right now? What is in the texture of this moment, unmediated by its social interpretation? The return, done again and again, thousands of times over months and years, is the practice. And what it slowly builds is the specific capacity that genuine solitude requires. The capacity to be with yourself without immediately generating a performance of being with yourself for an audience that is not there. This capacity, as it develops, produces changes that are visible to everyone around you long before you are fully aware of them. The quality of your attention shifts. People begin to feel, in conversations with you, that you are actually present rather than managing the interaction from a slight distance. The quality of your thinking shifts. The ideas that emerge from a mind that has learned to withdraw from its own social audience have a different texture than the ideas that emerge from a mind still performing for the audience. They are less smoothly presentable. They are more actual. They feel, to you and sometimes to others, like they came from somewhere deeper than the usual conversational thought. The quality of your emotional life shifts. The emotions that had been suppressed by the continuous social performance begin to be available again, not in the overwhelming form they take in the early stage of solitude, but in a more functional form. The capacity to feel something fully, without immediately having to manage it for the benefit of an imagined other, which is, it turns out, the only condition in which feelings can actually inform you rather than consume you. There is a historical pattern in the lives of the people who produced the work that endured, and the pattern is consistent enough to be diagnostic. The work that endured almost never came from the periods of maximum social engagement. It came from the periods of relative withdrawal. Newton's foundational work on gravity, calculus, and optics was produced during 2 years of enforced isolation during an epidemic. The work of the reclusive poet, who became one of the greatest in her language, was produced in a bedroom in a small town while she rarely left the house. The work of the mathematician who solved one of the greatest open problems in the field was produced during years of withdrawal from the professional mathematical community that had failed to recognize what he was doing. The pattern is not that great work requires misery. The pattern is that great work requires the specific condition that solitude provides: the withdrawal of the attention from the social audience, the silencing of the voice that is constantly asking what other people will think of this, the return of the full force of the mind to the work itself, unmediated by the performance of the work. This applies not just to artistic or intellectual work. It applies to the work of becoming a person. The people who seem, to those who have known them for years, to have become genuinely more themselves, more actual, more present, more at home in their own skin, have almost universally gone through periods of genuine solitude. Periods that their social environment read as withdrawal, as antisocial behavior, as depression, as giving up. Periods that were, from the inside, the specific and uncomfortable work of finally meeting themselves without the mediation of the audience. And what they brought back from those periods was not a new set of opinions or skills or identity markers. What they brought back was the thing that solitude alone produces. The thing that has no good single name in English, but that you recognize immediately in the people who have it. The density, the stillness, the quality of being fully inhabited by themselves rather than by the version of themselves that was constructed for the world. The modern world has made this harder than it has ever been. Not because modern people are weaker or less committed to depth, but because the tools for preventing genuine solitude have never been more sophisticated, more ubiquitous, more precisely calibrated to the exact psychological vulnerabilities that solitude requires you to sit with. Every notification is designed to interrupt the return of the attention to itself. Every feed is designed to populate the social audience inside your mind with fresh material the moment the audience begins to quiet. Every platform is architectured to make the social performance of your inner life not just possible but automatic, habitual, and rewarded. The tools are not neutral. They are specifically and intentionally designed to prevent the exact condition that genuine solitude requires. And they are extraordinarily effective. This is not a call to reject the tools entirely, because that is both impractical and unnecessary. It is a call to recognize that the use of the tools is in direct competition with the cultivation of genuine solitude, and to make conscious choices about that competition rather than pretending it does not exist. Every hour in the feed is an hour in which the social audience inside your mind is being refreshed and restocked. Every notification accepted is a small interruption of the return to self. Every post composed and sent is a small act of turning the inner experience outward for the social audience rather than sitting with it alone. None of these individual acts is catastrophic. The cumulative effect across years is the atrophy of the specific capacity that solitude requires. The capacity to be with yourself. The capacity to sit in the early stage noise without fleeing. The capacity to go deep enough that the deeper layer becomes accessible. This capacity, like any capacity, can be lost through disuse. And the modern world has created conditions in which it can be lost so gradually and so painlessly that you do not know it is gone until you try to use it and find that what returns is only the early stage noise, and that you cannot sit in it long enough to get past it. Building the capacity back is the project of a practice, not an event. It begins with small, consistent, daily periods of genuine solitude, not meditation as a performance, not quiet time as a productivity hack, but actual periods of sitting with yourself and returning, again and again, to your own interior experience as it actually is, rather than as it looks to an imagined other. 5 minutes, done daily and done genuinely, builds the capacity faster than occasional long retreats done with the social audience still running in the background. The consistency is what matters. The genuine withdrawal is what matters. The willingness to sit in the early discomfort without filling it with anything is what matters. And over time, the capacity grows. The early noise becomes bearable. The noise runs its course and something stills underneath it. The audience quiets. And what you find in the quiet, after all the performance has finally been set down, is the thing you have been performing for and about and toward for your entire adult life, without ever having turned around to look at directly. You find yourself, not the curated version, not the performing version, not the version assembled from other people's expectations and mirrors, the actual thing, which is stranger than the performance suggested, and deeper than the performance could contain, and more than sufficient for the life that remains. If this reached something real in you, do something now. Comment with these 3 words, "I go in," just that, so I can see how many of us are ready to withdraw from the audience long enough to find what is underneath. And give this video a like if it moved something, not for me, but as a small signal to yourself that you heard what it was saying. The next video takes this further into what specifically happens in the deep stage of solitude that the ancient traditions called the encounter with the inner figures, and that the depth tradition called the confrontation with the archetypes. It is stranger and more important than you might expect. I will see you there.